I'm Abby, I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the series where once a week I sit down and just talk about albums that I love. If 20-minute episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds, both here on my channel and over on my Instagram. If this by chance is your first time here, you picked one hell of a week because I'm wearing a cape. I'm wearing a damn cape! If I'm wearing my bright blue tights and my bright blue eyeshadow and my velvet cape, it could only be one artist on Vinyl Monday. This week, we're covering Sunshine Superman by Donovan. Congrats to those who guessed it. Remember, if you want to play along, I post my hints to what album I'm gonna cover next on my community tab. I host lots of other fun things over there. You should check it out, it's over on my channel. I went through so much effort to dress to match the album art this week. I do love dressing for a theme, but all my hard work is going to waste when the plastic is still on here, so let's take the plastic off. So my copy is an original, and you might have noticed something in the sleeve when I took this cover out. This copy of Sunshine Superman came with... I still can't believe I have this. It came with Donovan's autograph. This actually might be the coolest thing in my entire collection. I do have a copy of I'm With the Band signed by the woman herself, Miss Pamela Des Barres, but an autograph by one of your favorite artists, it just gives you so many nice feelings. Now that I'm done showing off the coolest thing in my whole collection, let's talk about this cover art. This illustration is by Dick Smith. It's nice Art Nouveau inspired design with Donovan's portrait right here. The 60s saw a huge resurgence in popularity of the Art Nouveau style. I think it's because all these swirls and bright colors played nice with psych sensibilities. The most famous example of this in album art that I can think of is this record, which famously uses an Alphonse Mucha illustration right on its front cover. I really need to find a way to display this album alongside this album because I think the art just complements each other beautifully. You have the track listing here on the front, but out of order. It is in order here on the back with some liner notes and a continuation of Smith's illustration. The streaming service covers have this track listing edited out. I think it's just because the text would be so small on your screen, it would be illegible anyway. And the UK version of this album has a totally different cover design, among other things that we'll be getting to later. That cover, nowhere near as good as this one. I just think this art encapsulates the album perfectly. It's hard to get better than this. On Sunshine Superman, of course, you have Donovan on vocals, guitar, organ, and as the principal songwriter. We also have John Cameron on keys, Bobby Ray on bass, Eddie Ho on drums, and Sean Phillips playing the sitar. John Cameron also does the arrangements for these tunes, and this album was produced by Mickey Most. Once again, covering our personnel is the perfect segue into talking about the recording and production of Sunshine Superman. I promise I won't get into the habit of saying this, but roll transition. I just have a feeling that the bumpers for this album are gonna be so much fun to record. Anyway, 1966 is an interesting point in Donovan's career. For the past couple years, he's been accused of what I can best sum up in my chronically online Zoomer terms, the cardinal sin of being a clout chaser. This is a Donovan compilation from the late 60s. I'm pulling this one out because I feel its mixed bag track listing can best describe the awkward transitional period that Donovan is in his career right now. He's pinned down as riding Bob Dylan's coattails, and he's penned by the media as being sort of the across-the-pond answer to Dylan. But he never had quite the same grasp that Dylan did on songwriting. Don't get me wrong, Donovan is a wonderful songwriter. His strengths were just in entirely different areas that he hadn't explored yet. To add insult to injury, Donnie is very openly a huge fan of Dylan's. No, Dylan did not dislike Donovan. That rivalry was largely invented by the same media that were calling Donovan a Dylan ripoff. You see it in footage from Don't Look Back. Dylan picks on Donovan the way an older brother lovingly picks on their younger sibling. In turn, Donnie totally follows around Dylan like a younger sibling would their older. I was the oldest sibling, so I kind of know how Dylan felt in that respect. But come Fairy Tale, I have a US version right here. We see the bones of what will become Sunshine Superman. Everybody knows Colors, one of his greatest hits. It was on Fairy Tale, and I don't really think that's so much representative of Sunshine Superman. You hear it a little more on Jersey Thursday and Sunny Good Street. There's fuller instrumentation and just a general vibe shift towards the magical and the whimsical. The Fairy Tale follow-up, which will be Sunshine Superman, is recorded sporadically from the end of 1965 through April of 66. How did these sessions come about? I'm going to tell this the best way I possibly could for this video, in the format of a fairy tale. Once upon a time, there was this absolute fuckface named Alan Klein, the guy who royally screwed over the Rolling Stones for decades after his departure from them, but we're not anywhere near there yet. Right now, we're hanging out in California with Donovan as he appears on The Ed Sullivan Show. During his travels, our valiant hero Donovan bumps into Mickey Most, a producer who Alan Klein is currently managing. Mickey had made some hits for groups like The Animals and Herman's Hermits. He heard what Donovan was doing with Fairy Tale, and he was hooked. He was going to do everything in his power to encourage him to go running in the direction that he took with Jersey Thursday and Sunny Good Street. Mickey books some time at Columbia Studios in Hollywood for Donovan to record and really encourages him to keep at this new artistic direction. Once a single or two is recorded, Mickey moves the circus over to EMI Studios at London to lay down the rest of the album. While writing the Sunshine Superman material, Donovan was madly in love with his muse Linda Lawrence, but she wouldn't give him the time of day. This is years before Jenny Boyd, future wife of Mick Fleetwood, sister of Layla herself, is in the picture. Don't worry, this love story turns out a lot better than Layla does. Donovan and Linda do eventually get together and live happily ever after, the end. But we're not there right now. This is now. There's lots of nods to Donovan's buddies in America on this thing. Bert's Blues is named after Bert Jansch. Bob Dylan and Joan Baez are name dropped in The Trip. The Fat Angel is named after Mama Cass of the Mamas and the Papas, and also name drops the Jefferson Airplane. And there is lots and lots of mid-century medieval on this album. So I use the term mid-century medieval a lot on this channel. It tends to come up a lot when you're talking about psych music. It's my favorite subgenre of the psych period. I refer to it all the time, but what actually is it? Here is your crash course on mid-century medieval. So throughout the 60s, there is this interest in medieval and a little bit of Renaissance imagery. It starts in the early 60s with home decor and restaurants, but as we move into the late 60s, it starts to take its hold in the arts. I feel like medieval revival might be a better way to describe it in music, but I'm just gonna call it mid-century medieval. The song The Castle Far by Matthew Southern Comfort is mid-century medieval in music. It's got a flute, it's got the tale of a damsel in distress, suits of armor, a steed, a doomed quest. This song belonged in a 60s Camelot film. And Donovan in this stage in his career is a prime example. There's themes of journeying, magic, mysticism, mythical creatures, princesses in castles, village life, pastoral scenes, you name it, you got it. Instruments like the harpsichord, the lute, the recorder are all championed by this very niche subgenre. But we hear it a lot more in 60s music because all of those instruments get worked into the mix with the Eastern elements of psych, like sitar, tabla, more avant-garde stuff like the theremin. The ISB did it. The Rolling Stones do it extensively on their Satanic Majesty's request. But the artist who arguably did this best were The Fool. This is the only record under The Fool's name. It's pretty out there. It's all of the wackiest elements of mid-century medieval. You really see this style popping up in their clothes. The Fool were the kings and queens of mid-century medieval fashion. They look like an acid trip Ren Fair, and I love it. My dress today is inspired by them and the clothes that they made for the Beatles' Apple Boutique in London. Donovan flew in the same circle as the Beatles. He went to India with them, and he starts picking up on their fashion cues that they were picking up from The Fool. Donnie starts wearing all these silk caftans, beads, pendants like mine right here, and velvet capes. I'm wearing this replica of the cape Jenny Boyd wore in the Wear Your Love Like Heaven video. I made all of the clothes that you're seeing on me here today. I love this totally wacky subgenre of the 60s psych thing. It's probably as out there as psych got. That is your rundown of mid-century medieval, and you might see how it appears on the Sunshine Superman songs now. The track listing of this album goes as follows. Opening up side one, we have the title track Sunshine Superman, followed by Legend of a Girl Child Linda. Then Three Kingfishers. Hi everybody, B-roll Abby hopping in, getting down to the kinks by the way. I realized immediately after I stopped filming that every time I said 3 kingfishers, I in fact meant 12 kingfishers. This prime example of me barely passing math. And side 1 is rounded out with Bert's Blues. Opening up side 2, we have Season of the Witch, followed by The Trip, then Guinevere, next The Fat Angel, and the album closes with Celeste. Now, if you're watching this from across the pond, either from the UK or Ireland, first off, hello! I seem to have a pretty large British viewer base that has trickled over from my Instagram onto here. And of course, the man himself, Donovan, is Scottish, so I love you a lot. Secondly, if you have a UK copy, your track listing is totally different. Here's what that looks like. Opening up this album, you still have the title track, Sunshine Superman, followed by Legend of a Girl Child, Linda. Then comes The Observation, followed by Guinevere, and then Celeste. And side one closes with Writer in the Sun. Opening up the second side, you have Season of the Witch, followed by The Hampstead Incident. Then Sand and Foam, followed by Young Girl Blues. Next, Three Kingfishers, and your album closes with Bert's Blues. Sunshine Superman was initially released in August of 1966 in the United States. Epic Records issues the title track as the promo single in July, even though it should have come out in January. We are getting to all of that, I promise, but first, I want to go through a list of the session musicians on Sunshine Superman because I think this is really interesting. I'm going to read these from my notes. You have Eric Ford on guitar, John Cameron on harpsichord and the song's arrangement, Spike Heatley on double bass, Bobby Orr on drums, Tony Carr on percussion, and it was engineered by Peter Vince. This song allegedly also featured, buckle up, Jimmy Page on guitar and John Paul Jones on bass. I say allegedly because it was really hard to keep track of all of these things, and the studio logs for Sunshine Superman have unfortunately been lost to the sands of time. Back to the release of Sunshine Superman, the album. This did not come out in the UK until 1967. This is where things get interesting. Sunshine Superman, along with Mellow Yellow, were not released in the UK until June of 1967, almost a year after this guy's initial release. And both of them had a totally scrambled eggs, chopped up, screwed up track listing. I go into the differences between releasing an album in the UK and in the US in my Piper at the Gates of Dawn episode and my Sgt. Pepper's episode. I get into the dispute between labels and distributors in the Tom Petty video. So due to a contractual dispute between Donovan's US label Epic and UK label Pi Records, Donovan's releases were held back in the UK through all of 1966 and most of 67. This proves to be a huge blow. Once things were settled, Pi smashes together Sunshine Superman and Mellow Yellow into a kind of compilation thing and releases them both in the UK. Upon its initial release in 66, Sunshine Superman is one of the first psych albums to break through in the mainstream, if not the first. Donovan also becomes one of the first UK artists to get busted for having the weeds. That happened in June, a full 7 months before Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. Take that, Rolling Stones! In the years to follow, Sunshine Superman becomes a gold standard for the psych-tinged folk artists, and a classical guitarist named Gabor Szabo covers the song Ferris Wheel on his record Dreams. Not like that'll become one of the greatest jazz guitar albums of all time or anything, but enough of the nonsense. What do I think of Sunshine Superman? Going in, I am a big Donovan fan. I am a huge Donovan fan. Of all the albums I've covered on this series, this is one of the records that is more ingrained into my everyday life. I listen to this in my everyday music rotation while I'm making dinner, while I'm winding down for bed at night, while I'm getting ready in the morning. So it's hard to have independent thoughts on Sunshine Superman besides, oh, this album's great, these songs are good. My first exposure to any of the Sunshine Superman material was not when Season of the Witch blew up on TikTok. It was the Gabor Szabo recording of Ferris Wheel. I discovered that in maybe March or April of 2020 while home from college. When I add Dreams to my collection, you will know because it will be on this series ASAP. Thank you to my best friend and fellow Donovan superfan Jackie for pointing some of these out to me. If Sunshine Superman the single was released in January of '66 like it was supposed to, these are all of the watershed moments in Psych that the song would have predated. 8 Miles High by the Byrds. Sunshine Superman would have beat it by 2 months. Shapes of Things by the Yardbirds, also by 2 months. Over, Under, Sideways, Down, also by the Yardbirds, would have also beat it by 5 months. Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones. Sunshine Superman would have been out 5 months before that. And this is the big one. Tomorrow Never Knows by the Beatles. Sunshine Superman would have beat this song by 7 whole months. Basically, what I'm trying to say through this illustration is that it's been really cool seeing Donovan slowly get the recognition he deserves, both as a songwriter and as a pioneer of Psych. Donovan is at his best when he's a storyteller, and he really flexes that quality on Sunshine Superman. He's not a storyteller like Dylan is. Dylan talks in surrealistic vignettes, observations marked in vague words, and classic Gemini snark. Donovan doesn't have any of that. He never had any of that. Donovan tells fantastical stories through his flowery language and really painting detailed scenes with his words. Dylan in the 60s wrote like a beat poet, but Donnie wrote like a storybook. He would take this and perfect it on Where Your Love Like Heaven, and A Gift from a Flower to a Garden, and oh my god, Donovan album titles get really long. Legend of a Girl Child Linda is so sweet and tender and sorrowful. It's one of my go-to listen to when I cry songs. Legend of a Girl Child Linda, Three Kingfishers, Guinevere, and Celeste all feel like one long story. And once you know about Donnie and Linda, you see Linda's fingerprints all over this thing. Celeste is inspired by her, Guinevere is inspired by her, hell, Legend of a Girl Child Linda, named after her. And the title track was written for her too. I love the more assertive stance that Donovan takes with this song. In Guinevere and Celeste, he's pining and picking petals off of flowers. In Sunshine Superman, he's storming the castle. He's gonna get this girl. This record wouldn't be what it is without the team of musicians that Mickie Most brought in to back Donovan. The jazz breakdown on Bert's Blues is their high point. It's the coolest moment on the record. You can't help but shimmy your shoulders to it. I think I even got down to it in the original Sunshine Superman Vinyl Monday. Yeah, because that was back when I would play the album while I was splicing together the whole thing to post the next day. Vinyl Monday, once upon a time, was a lot simpler of an operation. And the session musicians work their magic on Season of the Witch. The atmosphere of that song needs the spooky keys. But out of all of those guys, Sean Phillips is the MVP of this record. The sitar is an indelible component to its atmosphere. I think of Three Kingfishers, and he shines on Ferris Wheel. It's this atmospheric track that feels like a hot breeze on a summer's night. Yes, the sitar absolutely marks Sunshine Superman as a product of its time. It is obnoxiously 60s. And yes, it is delightful for that exact reason, but maybe that's just me. Sunshine Superman is where Donovan finally hit his stride as an artist. He discovered the folly and the whimsical, the mystical and magical, and he discovered what he as an artist was all about. The whole thing feels like a dream you'd have after you were read a bedtime story. But the best thing about this dream is that you won't forget it when you wake up. Let Sunshine Superman cast its sleeping spell on you. I think this is Donovan's best album. My personal favorites are the title track, Legend of a Girl Child Linda, Three Kingfishers, Bert's Blues, Ferris Wheel, and The Trip. Remember, if you want to keep up with the faves, I have a Vinyl Monday Spotify playlist linked in my description. It is very long because it is a full playlist of all of my favorites from every Vinyl Monday I've ever done, even the ones before YouTube. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Hold on, gotta adjust my cape. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.